Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, and for sure we don't need to forget our online audience. We welcome you today to our session on fostering collaboration and innovation mechanism to manage a rising risk during these times of uncertainties. With the rapid changing world and the unexpected certainties and risks we are facing today, especially with the last COVID-19 pandemic and the uncertainties arising from climate change, we need to rethink our way of life and maybe also to reinvent ourselves to better cope with the new world and emerging technologies. We believe that it's the time to foster new collaboration and partnerships and to draw innovative pathways to manage risks stemming from new technology and digital economy and build up our resilience in this new era, the post-COVID-19. Let us we will take you today on a short journey with our guest speaker, Mrs. Nicole Manger, Mr. Bashar Kilani, and Mr. Philip Weiss. I would like to start first with Mr. Philip Weiss. He's the founder and CEO of ZN. He's the author of the book Hyperthinking, Creating a New Mindset for the Age of Networks. He's also entrepreneur and founder of leading digital communication agencies ZN. He worked with Pfizer, G&G, UPS, the EU Commission, and UN, among many other international and regional organizations. He's an educator. He taught at the university in terms of physical teaching and he has an online class with over 94,000 students. I'm honored to welcome you, Mr. Philip Weiss. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. We're living in very interesting times. And there's a Chinese proverb, which is also a curse, that says, may you live in interesting times. And I believe I have some slides that will illustrate this, if I may. I think it's another one. As I was saying, we live in interesting times. This is a proverb, but it's also a curse. And we've just been through major transformation, unprecedented challenges, from COVID-19 to the war in Ukraine, and to, of course, the global climate crisis, which is still a big challenge that we all have to face together. Now, Einstein said we cannot solve our problems at the same level of thinking that created them. So we need different approaches to these problems. And there's a Chinese character that says, a crisis means danger and opportunity. And with every crisis that we face, we need to think about what the dangers and what the opportunities that we're facing us and how we can embrace those opportunities. And we've seen in the last few years a massive digital acceleration. We're in a new place where everyone, whether they liked it or not, were forced to use online tools like they never did before. And we're also witnessing unprecedented events, black swans, things that we haven't predicted. And these are accelerated by digital channels like Twitter and all the other tools that we're surrounded with. Now, if you believe that information, or should I say knowledge, is power, and that the internet is the ultimate source of information, then your conclusion is that the internet is now the ultimate source of power. And by that, I mean the power to shape perception. Because if you shape perception, you change behavior. And if you change behavior, you change the world. And it starts with you. Everyone in this room and everyone on the internet who's following this conversation is part of this community. And every one of you can communicate, because with these social networks, we're all brands, we're all journalists, we all tell stories, and we can all connect globally with each other. Now, Twitter is the new press release, whether it's Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, we're seeing this with events unfolding right now. But to succeed in this new environment, we need new tools, and more importantly, we need a new mindset. Because what we're taught at university, at school, does not prepare us for this new world. I call this mindset hyperthinking. And this is my effort to try to define the kind of thinking I believe we desperately need to face these challenges. And it has 4 key dimensions. The first one is hypershifting, which means the ability to change mental models, to challenge our preconceptions, to look at the world through a new pair of glasses and to create the new mental models that we need for this new environment. The second one is hyperlearning, and that's what a lot of you are here to do today, which is to learn new ideas and to become a self-learner. Because in this new environment, and people were talking about this in the education segment, we need to own our own learning. And we need to do that throughout our lives, not at defined periods at university or at school, but throughout our lives. And we also need to learn to be creative. Creativity is a core skill. It's not something that you're born with, it's something that you can develop and that you must develop to invent the kind of models that will serve us. Third, hyperlinking, which is making use of our digital connections. We are all separated, we used to say by 7 degrees of separation, it's now 4 with the internet, so we're all connected to people who can help us. If we understand our networks, we can find people, we can find projects, and we can continue the conversation that starts today and take it home and connect globally to find the people that we can work with, to change and to find solutions to our problem. And finally, hyperacting, which is about putting your ideas in practice and learning to fail. Because your ideas will not work immediately, you will need trial and error, and you need to put your ideas in practice to test them out. And that's about being agile. So creating an idea, putting it outside in the world, checking what happens, learning, adapting, and constantly going through the same agile cycle. And I want to end with the importance of the power of networks, because I believe that this community here today is part of an extraordinary network, and that a simple conversation that starts today can lead to a transformation that can change people's lives all over the world. But to do that, you need to understand the network that you're a part of. You need to map your network. Which organizations are you part of? Which organizations, the people that you talk to, are connected to? And how can you use your profile online to connect, to share ideas, to influence people so that you can lead to actual change? So you need to understand that network, to connect with those people, and then to activate your network so that you can amplify your impact. And you can start by doing that today. If you go to the Knowledge Summit hashtag, you can follow the conversations that start today. You can suggest your own ideas. You can follow me at pvice on Twitter. But my most important and single idea is that you need to start doing it right now. And I'll end with this beautiful quote from a sage: just do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Now we'll move to our next speaker, Mrs. Nicole Manger. She's a team lead policy and public partnership in Berlin Federal Foreign Office. Mrs. Nicole works as a senior analyst in the Crisis Early Warning Unit Preview, and she is the team leader for strategic partnerships. In her capacity, she develops and implements the German government strategy to advance the use of data, technology, and innovation for stronger prevention, crisis response, and climate action through multilateral capacity building. Mrs. Manger is trained in international relations and law at UC Berkeley, UT Austin, and the Göttingen University. She brings for us a wide cross-sectoral expertise in security policy, diplomacy and development, cooperation through her previous assignment with the US DOS and Munich Security Conference on the Syria crisis, and with GIZ on sustainable development in West Africa. I am honored to invite Mrs. Nicole to talk about ways to sustaining peace through potential of data, technology, and innovation. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Elsa. Basically, picking up to just what Phil said, creating a new mindset and creating new ways of collaboration from the big strategic perspective, I'm going a bit into what the German Federal Foreign Office is doing to foster innovation, to enable data-driven and evidence-driven policy making, but also what we are doing to enable stronger multilateral and multi-stakeholder collaborations. So first, maybe a bit of background on where I come from. So you see here at the rooftop of this temple, so to speak, Preview. So Preview is the German Foreign Ministry's Crisis Early Warning Unit, and we serve the Foreign Ministry internally, but also interministerial processes and internationally. So what do? We have a whole big team of data scientists who utilize artificial intelligence, predictive modeling, but also do data visualizations, creating interactive maps to really support political decision-making processes at the highest level and at practical level internally, specifically to predict crises and to better anticipate and prevent crises. We are also responsible for the interministerial early warning process, so bringing together different ministries of the German government and really creating an all-of-government approach to specific crisis settings. And now I come to our third component, which is the whole field of multilateral initiatives, which I'm heading and leading. And I picked this one because what we see in the field of data analytics is we cannot do it alone. So we can do our dashboards just internally, but as soon as we want to create something open source for everyone to use, of course we have to engage different stakeholders in a co-creation process of those tools to increase acceptance. Crisis data funding, we cannot do it alone to make it sustainable. To also data quality standards, we cannot set those as the German government ourselves. We need to collaborate together. And so that's why this whole third field of international collaboration on using data, technology, and innovation for better crisis prevention is really a huge component of our work. And what I want to do today is present to you 2 to 3 current initiatives we have initiated, are leading together with the United Nations, with the EU, and our very close partners, the US, the Dutch government. So first one, and I don't know, maybe some of you, especially working in the United Nations field, might have heard of it already. So it's the Complex Risk Analytics Fund. And basically, what we do here is we bring together a wide array of stakeholders and partners, so be it governments, states, IOs, but also data providers, the private sector, civil society, and academia, to really sponsor and fund data and data analytics capabilities based on shared values and principles and quality standards. So this is really an effort to create an ecosystem for better crisis early warning through the potential of data and technology. And what it eventually will do is provide also a digital platform to share knowledge, to build capacities, and to really engage with each other. It has been launched last October by the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General and the World Data Forum and at the margins of the General Assembly, and it is now fully operative. And we are partnering with all kinds of UN organizations in its implementation, and also our partners, the US, the Finnish government, the Dutch, the European Union, and the UK. So moving to the next project, and this is really building on CRAFT. So CRAFT is still like a funding vehicle, but what we really want to enable is a joint collaborative space where the German government, other state governments, and the United Nations can engage on data analytics for better crisis early warning across the nexus. So we are speaking here on the humanitarian development and peace field, and also improving better preventive climate action. So it is anchored all in the Sustaining Peace agenda. And then you have those 4 pillars that I just mentioned, and it eventually should empower crisis early warning. And our approach is to bring in cutting-edge initiatives in the United Nations system that already harness the potential of data and technology and science-driven policymaking, and really connect those insights to political and operative processes. So we don't want to work in isolation. What we want to do is bridge silos and bridge the gaps from early warning and analytical insights to early action. And so what this will be supported by is an innovation accelerator, bringing in the private sector, startup scene, to really provide a joint platform for innovation in terms of technology. And finally, a whole capacity building component to really empower local actors also to use the tools that this data hub is going to generate. And finally, so this is now the big strategic agenda and 2 large-scale projects. What Preview is currently doing in its 2022 work stream has a very specific focus on climate, peace, and stability. And it is also innovative in the way how we combine political aspects and technical aspects. So what we are doing is we have a ministerial level conference in May, together with the US State Department, on sustaining peace amidst the climate crisis, the potential of data, technology, and innovation. And this is really a big, high-level agenda setting to advance this policy priority of ours. But it is supported by a large-scale open-source data visualization project, which you can see elements of here. And the idea is really to do it collaboratively with the multilateral system and also bringing in the international scientific community into a co-design process. So this will be a tool that is available openly on the internet in the end. It will be launched at the Berlin Climate and Security Conference in November and at the COP27. And because we do it open source, we have to create it together and cannot do it in isolation. So it is surrounded by this, what we call Preview Dialogue series. And it's basically a series of workshops and events that bring in the scientific community and multilateral end users of this tool. And I will stop here. I have the timeline for this, how it all interacts. I might save that for the discussion if it is needed. But we'll hand over back to Elsa.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, for your intervention. Now we will move to our last speaker, Mr. Bashar Kilani. He's the Managing Director of Accenture. Mr. Bashar, just let me introduce you, please. Mr. Bashar, he's the Managing Director at Accenture, and he's based in Dubai. He is a member of the Growth Markets Leadership Team, focusing on digital economy market and making trends that accelerate growth, transform operations, and enable organizations to build their digital core. As a corporate executive and advisory board member, Mr. Bashar has a track record of engaging new markets and leadership positions in general management, sales and marketing, consulting and services, and driving operational excellence. His international career spans the Middle East, Europe, and the USA. So I'm honored to invite you, Mr. Bashar, to talk about the futuristic perspective with a glimpse on digital economy offering new business models. The floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here today. I don't have slides, but I want to have a conversation. So hopefully we can engage in a discussion, because what I want to talk about is what's coming up. It's the future. And if I look at the internet as it started in the 90s, it was, in the first decade, the internet of data. We were collaborating, sharing data. And then we got into the internet of people. We started to interact as people. We started to build our networks and engage with the internet. And I think in the last 10 years, it became the Internet of Things with our mobile devices. We started to use it to get taxis, like with Uber, because they knew where we are and how we were moving. We were able to order things and get them delivered to our house. It became everything around where we are and what we're doing and the devices that we have on us, whether it's a camera, a GPS department, or anything like that. The internet of the future is going to be two things. It's going to be the internet of places, and we will live in a series of virtual and real experiences. And it's going to be the internet of assets. We will be able to use technologies like blockchain to exchange digital assets and value. We will have smart contracts, part of the NFT tokens that we have, so that we can actually exchange value and capabilities. If I look at this, that's what we, in the next 10 years, will experience as the metaverse. And I don't mean it as the science fiction part of it. I really mean it for business and our personal interactions. If I look at 2030, we will live in a world where we will have series of virtual and real interactions. And we will probably exchange a lot of digital assets. And I think we will live in a world which is going to be increasingly transforming the way we do business. Whether we talk about customer service or workflows of business, how we create products, how we distribute products, and how we run our operations. If I look at the new world, the digital economy or the metaverse, it is going to be a completely new landscape for us to operate in. And we need to rethink and redefine how we get there. And I think in Dubai, we are very fortunate of having a forward-looking leadership. 2 days ago, there was the first law or guidance on dealing in digital assets. There's been a lot of discussions on what does it take to build a digital economy. And it depends on, in my view, 4 main aspects. One is the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the capabilities that you have, the bandwidth, the 5G networks, the multi-cloud environment, all the technology that enables you to become a key player in the digital economy. Second part is rules, regulations, and policies. Your data rules, your cloud rules, your set of regulations that govern the way you interact in that new space, how you exchange value, how you exchange maybe money or services or capabilities. And the third thing, in my view, is talent. The ability to build talent and capability that can create this universe and work in this, what I would call the multiverse, because people will be moving from one entity or one digital platform to the other. And they will keep their identity, they will keep their assets, they will be able to transact and manage things. And we will probably get to a point where it's difficult to differentiate between the physical world and the digital world. But these are the 3 main components needed as organizations, cities, and companies are building the foundations for the digital economy. In Accenture, we have, over the last 18 months, hired more than 150,000 people. Because during the pandemic, everybody went through an accelerated digital transformation, or what they call a compressed digitization. And with the new realities, it was important for us to create a digital world or platform for us to introduce these 150 new joiners to the organization, but also to the customers that they were working with. And we created a virtual world called One Accenture Park, somewhere there in the metaverse. And we handed out 60,000 devices in what probably is arguably the largest 3D handout of devices for this kind of space in the metaverse. And we were having these people coming to this virtual space, getting educated, trained, enabled, and preparing them for the work in Accenture. That's probably not going to be the exception. Organizations will use this kind of virtual platforms to run meetings in the future, because a lot of what we're doing today is build digital twins for our real world up there somewhere in the virtual world. We're looking at an environment where we will have more virtual and real interactions. You could be sitting in a virtual meeting room that's a digital twin of a physical office, and you will be interacting between the different capabilities that you have there. Imagine this idea. You have a doctor sitting somewhere in Mayo Clinic operating on a patient in Dubai. What does that take? It takes digital infrastructure, it takes rules and regulations that govern this kind of engagement, but it also enables the patient to sit in Dubai without traveling, taking advantage of this great infrastructure that we have here, and benefiting from the medical capabilities that are available in outside of this part of the world. That kind of world is going to be what we are going to transition into over the next few years. And it's going to be much faster than we thought it would be. Each one of the phases that I mentioned, the data, the people, the things, and now the places and assets are going to be very much coming together much quicker and faster than we think, because of the acceleration in the pandemic, but also because of the incredible spread of technology and digital capabilities that the world is enjoying now. The network is becoming much bigger. And of course, with this world, we get into new realities of risk and challenges. Take this number. 80% of crimes in 2025 are going to be cyber crimes. 80% of crimes are going to be cyber crimes. What does this mean for our police force? Does every policeman need to be a computer science graduate? Does the infrastructure, talent, and regulations that we have today help us deal with this kind of a world? Look at what's happening in the world today in the crisis with Russia and Ukraine and the impact it has on supply chains. Above and beyond the disruption we've seen from COVID, you're going to have an increased level of challenges on supply chains around the world because of that. And again, you will come to a new world where digital assets and digitizations and the use of AI and connectivity is going to make it much more important for us to be able to predict different situations coming up, to plan for them, and to use the new world that we're living in and match between the real world that we have and the virtual world that we live in as well. I'd argue education, healthcare will probably be the first sectors to be completely redefined and redesigned using this kind of environment. I don't know, these were a couple of thoughts, and if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to engage in conversations or discussions, or we can take them also as part of the questions in the panel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bashar. I will give the floor to our audience here in presence. If you have any question, please just let us know. Okay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, distinguished lady and gentlemen, for an outstanding discussion and very insightful insights. My name is Walid Hussein. I come from industry, the Saudi Arabian oil company, Saudi Aramco. So I want just to bring this great conversation slightly home in this part of the world, the Middle East. One of the things at least we see in industry is the lack of impact of PPP, public-private partnership, when it comes to innovation and technology. We talk about innovation. We talk about the innovation ecosystem, the innovation value chain. Many stakeholders are involved: academic institutions, research enterprises, government, private sectors, companies. The entire ecosystem is actually participating in what seems to be an effort to make an impact coming out of innovation. Yet the results are not to the expectations of what policymakers are looking for to make a real, genuine impact of innovation, technology collaboration, digital enablers, partnerships. So if I may ask the distinguished panel here, what is your word of wisdom or recipe for establishing a sustainable, impactful, and visionary modus operandi, if you will, or a charter that governs Triple P, and to make sure that we are on the right track and all these stakeholders in this great ecosystem, good intentions are exhibited by all parties. Translating these good intentions into impact has always been a challenge, at least in the Middle East. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I would start with Nicole for private-public partnership, if you like, to answer.
Yes, thank you so much, and thanks for the question. I think that's, to be honest, a huge challenge for us working on the policy side of things. So on the one hand, a huge aspiration on our side to work with the private sector, to work with tech startups, to bring in academia more significantly. But I guess, so first of all, I guess we are seeing, we were discussing that in a lunch break with Phil. So on the government side, there is a lot of hesitancy when it comes to innovation, you know, because they are very like long-standing structures, processes that everyone trusts and believes in. And now when a section like Preview is set up and we say we want to, you know, enable data-driven policy making, there is some skepticism, you know, especially when you think of the higher level diplomats. And so a lot of our effort actually goes into talking to the people, increasing transparency, you know, working a lot on increasing data literacy, I think, really just increasing understanding and therefore trust in new tools in innovation. And I think this you know, exchange and collaboration also helps in terms of you know, fostering these multi-stakeholder networks. And I think we can learn a lot from the private sector, from innovation strategists like Phil, and from you know, companies like Accenture in how to drive and really implement innovative, creative processes. And that's why I think we are really trying to you know, expand those collaborations and learn from other stakeholders. How to you know, you know, the best way to do it, I cannot tell you from my perspective right now, because we are in the process of learning, doing it better, bringing in people, but I think that's the first step, you know, being open and initiating the process. And that's all I can say, but I guess maybe Phil or Bashar have already more to tell you on best practices.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So I would give the floor to Bashar and then Philip for your input on this.
Thank you. I think your question is very relevant. And talking about the region, we are one of the youngest regions in the world. So 70% of our population is less than 30 years of age. 50% is probably less than 25 years of age. So that means that the change in this part of the world is going to be extremely fast. In 5 or 10 years, you will see a very different generation. These are digital natives. They are highly educated on average compared to the rest of the world. And you can see that universities, whether in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates or the region in general, are getting up the ranks, whether it's on education or research or anything to do with that. I would argue that you will see a Middle East that is playing a much bolder role in digitization and the digital economy in the next 10 years at a very accelerating rate. And I would also see that many of our large enterprises, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or in the United Arab Emirates or the Gulf in general, are very much engaged with the youth. They are engaged in startups. They are engaged in programs that help build the levers that can support us with the digital economy. Just think about all these companies that focus on Arabic content. We've got 400 million Arabic speakers in the region, and there's a lot of focus on creating Arabic content and capabilities around that. Look at all these AI and data-driven startups that you have in this part of the world. Look at the large transformation that we've seen in this world here, whether it's around e-commerce, retail, digital banking, the network, the infrastructure. I think the digital transformation in this part of the world is something to be very aware of, and it's going to be even more, it's going to be playing a much bigger role in the economy in the future, locally and globally.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, I think that, first of all, we're at an inflection point right now. So we've gone through this enormous change. So I think there's a real opportunity for change. I also think that it's incredibly, large organization structures can be very resistant to change. It doesn't matter what technology, it doesn't matter how much money, it doesn't matter even what training you give. If the culture, the systems, and the mindset are not there or are resistant to it, it doesn't work. So I think that the 4 things I would focus on to unblock this, and I don't think it's going to happen naturally. I think that the natural thing is to resist change. So you need to change the mindset of the individuals, because they're the ones who can take action. They need to learn to take risks, and that in an organization means you have to do something that might risk your own position, and that's why so few people like to do that, because they feel they're putting their entire career, they're displeasing previous people who basically see the world differently. And then you have systems, because you can create systems that reward that kind of risk-taking. So if you embrace a new mindset, new culture, new systems, then you can start encouraging risk. But I think, and I've seen that in sectors where they had all the money, all the resources, and they resisted change. Like, in governments and institutions, it's very hard to make a genuine change. So you really need to break through it, and you need to take bold action to do so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Philip. Can we move to a second question? Sir, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for our panelists for their contributions. I have a question to Bashar, and I would like also to see the reaction of the remaining panelists. Of course, Accenture is well known. I myself discovered it when AI was coming back on the scene, and Accenture put the first reports estimating the job losses because of AI automation and what have you. And after that, somehow things were slightly modified by some other studies, and even Accenture, I believe, started changing its position on that. So my point here is really regarding the metaverse, because I feel like Accenture, as everybody else, is more responding to technologies than really thinking about technologies that are needed for our problems. That means needs-driven technologies and solutions. And when I hear you talk about the metaverse, you are taking it as being, a fact that we just have to adapt to and make the best out of it, knowing that just Zuckerberg, for some reasons, to make, a better business, because he had to upgrade his business, he thought of this metaverse thing. So, don't you think that by just falling over and over again into these traps of new technologies that are there just to make some GAFAs, make more billions, and knowing that in this case, for instance, the metaverse is really running into a brick wall, which is energy, electricity, okay? It's a humongous CO2 emitter. And as a matter of fact, the metaverse is not gonna come as fast as probably you said because of the energy problem. So not only that we are blindly falling into these energies, so we are being slaves to whatever new ideas come out because we don't wanna miss out, okay? We know that it's gonna exacerbate our CO2 emissions and consequently accelerate our existential risks. And here SEOE of Accenture, going full speed ahead for this kind of technologies without really trying to at least take the time and understand what would be the negative side effects of such new technologies, knowing that I don't see them really solving any major problems, especially our existential threats. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think this is a very valid debate and conversation. And again, I'm very much against technology for the sake of technology. I think it needs to have a reason, whether to improve somebody's life or to improve business conditions or something like that. Some people would argue that if we go back to 1990 and talk about the internet, we would hear exactly what you just said. Where is this taking us? What does that mean to our businesses? How can we live with it or without it? What are all the downsides to the internet? And of course, like anything else in the world, there's a positive and a negative aspect to it. And I think if I stand today and I look back, I don't think anyone in this room would argue that the internet has fundamentally changed our lives, whether it's through data or connecting people or the Internet of Things. When we said in 2014 that every business will be a digital business, I think if you look back today, each one of us today is probably a digital company in all the devices and capabilities that we have, in the way we're interacting with each other. And whether we believe the metaverse is the right thing or it's just a hype or something like that, if I look into the future and I look into the next 8 years to 2030, I think there will be much more digitization to every aspect of our life than what we have today. I would firmly argue that we will have more digital, virtual, and real experiences, and we will be hopping through those experiences in a different way and in a much easier way to do these things. And organizations, governments, and individuals that take advantage of this technology will probably come out as leaders in their businesses and their worlds, and others that do not prepare themselves for them will probably struggle. If I just look at the pandemic, companies that had sufficient investment in digital infrastructures before the pandemic were maybe performing twice as good as companies that didn't make that investment. During and after the pandemic, it became 5 times, because overnight you had to rely on this digital infrastructure to do your business and transform the world. And it's our job to provide you with an outlook or a foresight of what the future looks like. And it's people's responsibility to take that and prepare for it. If I tell you that in 2025, 80% of crime is going to be cyber crime, it's important to prepare for that. And the question is not if you and your organization will have a cyber attack, the question is when you and your organization will have a cyber attack and whether you will be ready at that time or not. I would argue strongly that we are going to be living in a world that's much more digitized than the one that we live in here today. And it's going to develop much faster and quicker than the rate of change and in digitization that we've had in the past. And it's an opportunity for us to understand this and shape it for our business and our livelihood and our existence than to be a lagger in this space. Again, we can debate a lot about this, but as a consulting firm in technology, it's our duty to give a roadmap of what's going to the world's going to look like in the next 5, 3, 8, or 10 years. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question. We can have a chat afterwards as well. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bashar. Philip, you have an intervention here,
No,
please.
I think it's a very interesting point, and I'm reminded of, those of you who remember Second Life, which was a big hype 10 years ago. Now, I believe actually that the metaverse is going to have a significant impact, but I think what you say is a very good observation, and I think technology is most powerful when it's simplest. And if you look at the way the internet emerged, and I think it's really important to go back to that, it's simple things like email, very simple websites that really accelerated the fact that people started using it. And I think today, when we face the challenges we're talking about, we don't need a metaverse, we need ideas, we need to connect people. And we need to start using the tools we have, whether it's social media and email, to exchange ideas and collaborate. And I think the tools are there. They don't need to be super sophisticated, and they can have a massive impact, but most people significantly underuse them. So I would say look for what's simple, use it now, and you'd be surprised at the amazing impact that can already have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Philip. We have another question. Yes. Sorry, first, and then we give you the floor.
شريف زكي باحث إدارة مخاطر وأزمات دكتوراه جامعة القاهرة.
PhD from Cairo. I was asking about how to benefit from AI now, especially with startups and with financial companies in financial institutions.
Financial, in terms of finance and risk finance. Who would like to answer from our panelists, please?
I'll have a go. So like any other aspect, every business today is a digital business, and every business has data to manage it. What AI helps us do, and I like to call it augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, because it helps us analyze data and discover patterns and highlight risks much quicker and faster than the human brain can ever do. That's really the value of it. You can automate processes of looking at data, identifying patterns, highlighting risks, and so on. In financial systems, this is extremely important. We sit on huge amounts of data. Sometimes we call it big data. Sometimes we call it useless data. It's important that we make this data rich data. We need to have the right algorithms that can look at this data and identify trends, opportunities for us, so that we focus on that, but at the same time highlights risks. So when we talk about anti-money laundering, when we talk about all these risks in the financial sector, we can train our algorithms to identify these patterns and trends and highlight the areas of risk and help us take action on it. It will make it quicker, faster, and much more reliable than having humans look at it, and it will take more time and it's more prone to error.
Okay, thank you, Bashar. Would you like
Thank
to?
you.
No. We have, sir, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have two questions. One is, I would like to have your perspectives on the level of preparation of governments for managing this risk, creating the new infrastructures for collaboration, for innovation, to be prepared for the next crisis, and the cyber crisis which is just coming. now. So I would like to get your point of view of the level of preparation, perhaps in the regions or in Europe. And then the second question is, what would be your recommendation to significantly upskill our leaders?
So would you like to, yeah, please?
So I think, and I'm looking at this because we worked a lot on pandemic communication around COVID-19, and especially disinformation. And the reality, and I think I heard other panelists saying this, is that we are very ill prepared for the kind of crisis that governments are facing. And we saw that during the pandemic. And we saw that we have trouble dealing with misinformation, disinformation, simple scientific stories that people need to understand why they need to get vaccinated and things like that. So we have crises at a very fundamental level. And I think governments and institutions really need to change to be able to adapt for this, because we are going to have a series of crises. It's only accelerating. And so I think the leadership needs to say, okay, we can't have the processes and the structure that we have now. They don't work. We're not ready for the next crisis and pandemic yet. So I think we need hopefully COVID-19 has shocked people into realizing that something was wrong, but we don't seem to have taken significant action on climate change. So, it feels like we're going to have to wait until we get right in the middle of it before we start taking real action. So I would say, please, if you're in government, realize that you need to massively change the training, education, and approach to crisis management and pandemic preparation and crisis preparation, which is part of what you're doing with the additional level of being able to take action from the data.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Nicole, would you like to, or you don't have anything to add?
Well, maybe just a small addition. I completely agree with what Philip said. And also relating back to the previous question, I think it's also essential in crisis management to really distinguish or determine a bit more precisely when AI is useful, when technology is useful, when innovation is useful for crisis prediction, and when it is not. I can give you a very practical example from what we are doing. So usually when you have large amounts of data sets, like Bashar was saying, then you can identify those trends and patterns that are very valuable to have to better anticipate crises. And then those AI systems work. But for example, it is very difficult to predict the psychological decision of one political leader to do something. We cannot predict Ukraine. It was very difficult to predict even Afghanistan using those AI models. So I think it's really relevant to determine when is it useful to use those AI models, when is it not useful. And also, I think you can monitor trends and patterns, but to identify causal mechanisms like the drivers of conflicts, really understanding in depth what are the reasons, what should we do politically, I think then you really need humans, experts, also on the ground, in the delegations, missions abroad, really who have a comprehensive understanding of what is going on. And it brings me to my final point. I think it's really important that we use those technologies to support our decision-making, but they are not the decision makers. I think that's
okay. Thank you, Nicole. We're running out of time. Can we take a last question? We had questions online, but apparently we don't have time to address them. One last question.
Yes, I would just like to ask, do we think...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that we have enough time to reflect upon the ethical process about what to do and not to do? And we can do things, and we should do things. We can do things, but we maybe shouldn't do things. So how do we think about, we have, for example, 4 years ago here, a humanoid called Sophia, came from Silicon Valley. She said on the panel, I'm here now, I would like to create my family, and I would like you to help me to get human rights. A machine asking the intelligence of the world on the stage, can I get human rights? So my question is, how do you see, how do we foster a sustainable process of analyzing technology and values?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so I'll take that. I have the honor of sitting on the Dubai AI Ethical Advisory Board. And I think it's important to put things in context. As my colleague said, we should really use AI to augment humans' capabilities and not to replace them. So, as a doctor, I use AI to help me diagnose this particular case. I give it a lot of data that it can do quicker, faster, and maybe with less errors than myself. But I'm the doctor that makes the decision on what to do. Same with the manager, lawyer, politician. This is a technology that's there to augment humans' abilities and capabilities. There are also certain rules and guidance for where and how to use artificial intelligence. Number one is explainability. I need to know why this algorithm decided that this is the right outcome. And when I understand why it made that decision, I can actually, as the doctor or the lawyer or the manager, make the right thing to do. I need to make sure that the data that is been used in training this has been, so there's no bias in this data. Because you can train systems on biased data and the outcome will be biased by whatever you train them on. And I keep giving this example. When we look for programmers, you get 90% or 80% of the recommendations by algorithms to be male. Just because historically we had more male programmers does not mean that we will only have male programmers that we recruit. So that kind of bias we need to remove out of the data. So when we train the algorithm, gender should not be an area. So that should be muted. Many of the facial recognition algorithms today have higher accuracy on the predictions when the skin is white than when it is different colors. And that would create biases. This is why you see a lot of sensitivity around using facial recognition capabilities, because the accuracy is different. So as long as the systems do not have bias in the data that's trained them, i.e. the systems are fair, the system is explainable. I understand why the bank refused to give me the loan based on an algorithm, because 1, 2, 3, 4, it was explained to me. Yeah? And it's transparent and fair. I see AI is a great tool to help people take the decisions and as long as we understand that the ultimate decision maker is the human being and not the machine. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you, Bashar. Would you like? I will have the last two interventions. So,
Yeah,
Nicole, then Philip, please.
No, just a quick remark. I think this question of how much time we have was a very relevant one. Because, so usually the innovation is going so fast that those people who actually are concerned with the ethical questions, most of it, like lawyers, social scientists, even philosophers, they couldn't even keep track of, the fastness of the innovation developments. And so I want to stress, or I want to end by stressing this again, that's why I believe this cross-sectional collaboration is so important, especially when developing ethical standards. I think it's critical that not only data scientists or a technology consulting firm by itself would determine those standards, because they are the most knowledgeable of the technical questions, but that you really have consultation processes with a wide area of stakeholders to really manage the risks and have wide, perspectives being taken into account when making decisions and also when setting up governance standards. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Yeah.
So I think we have no idea of what's coming in terms of ethical problems. I think the companies that are driving this are not, and we've seen this by the past track record, thinking about it, it's not necessarily malicious, but I think the world has changed completely, and we're going to need a massive crisis to wake up and realize, oh my God, we created this. Now people who get facial recognition, we had no idea. So I think what we're facing is a situation where the technology is completely out of sync with our understanding. You talked about explainability. I don't think, I think 98% of people have no idea how this works and how, the unforeseen consequences of these technologies. So I think we're going to experience a series of dramatic crises, and then we're going to sit back and say, oh my God, we need a structure to manage this. But I don't think we have the understanding of the magnitude of these crises yet, but that's why leadership, people need to start educating themselves very seriously and be prepared for something unexpected to basically force that conversation.
Okay, thank you. So we're obliged to close because we're done with our session. I see clearly that we need really to reinvent ourselves and to work hard to be ready to whatever will come up in the future in terms of new technologies and innovation. I would like to thank our panelists, Mr. Bashar, Ms. Nicole, and Mr. Philip, and would like to give them a clap. Thank you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you.